All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health. Welcome back. I'm super excited for this show. I've seen these gentlemen not only on my show, but on other people's shows as well, including Reed's, quite a few times. So I won't keep you guys too long in this portion of the show. Make sure you go check out the links below to follow me and these guys everywhere you can find them. And let's go. What is up, everybody? My name is Kyle Matovic. I am the host of the In Liberty and Health podcast, where we talk all things liberty, health and wellness, and beyond. My hope is to encourage and spread the message of liberty and physical and mental well-being. I hope you enjoy all the topics we talk about with our guests. We're on all major streaming platforms, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Man, I'm doing as good as anyone can do getting buried by his 13-year-old son on leg day.
I'm not going to apologize for not being on this podcast because I got to go see Metallica. So if that's a problem, kiss my ass. Okay? All right.
What's up, everybody?
No,
Joe and Justin, welcome back. I'm very, very stoked to have Ian's here. I was just listening to Ian's on a Reed show from like a year ago, or might have even been like two, just going over kind of some of the COVID stuff back then, and that feels like we're so far removed. But yeah, I guess we can get into that a little bit later. Justin, how you doing today?
I'm not doing too bad. I feel like that show 2 years ago on Reed's show was back when me and Joe kind of predicted the fall of the Libertarian Party. Like,
right?
Like play-by-play, too.
Joe, what about you? What's going on, man?
Oh, geez, life's crazy, man. New job, changing positions, running for mayor. Well, attempting to run for mayor. They seem to put a whole bunch of new rules in there. Makes it real hard to run for mayor when you're homeless. Job, working on a couple campaigns right now, in addition to my own. Still working on medical marijuana, getting it legalized here. Our state just opened up a brand new citizens initiative that I'm trying to help out with, the ranked choice voting. And I'm busy.
Drop the whole ranked choice voting thing. I'll tell you that right now. The math doesn't add up. It's not actually a good thing. It doesn't help. It doesn't work. It's actually made the third parties in Maine and Vermont completely irrelevant.
Yeah, I know there's a certain risk of that, but right now, the thing is, in Idaho in particular, now Maine and Vermont, most of those were purplish enough. State of Idaho, we're 70% red. So ranked choice voting pretty much throws it up in the air for anybody, because third parties are just and independents have just as much or have as much opportunity as the Democrats now in this state. So it's like I said, it's crazy. I know star voting was one of the options that was coming out. Ranked choice voting was something that worked for Alaska, maybe not so much for Maine. But again, we're more with independents, and that's part of the thing with the whole third parties is between the way the LNC screwed, the Libertarian Party this last 2 years, and what the Green parties have done to themselves. Literally, we need something that creates opportunities for independents, because that's the only way forward at this point, unless we do something to recapture the third parties again from these lunatics that have taken charge of them.
Well, I mean, why capture the third parties instead of trying to capture one of the major two? Like, and honestly, like I've been blackpilled about every strategy, every which way for years going on end, but like it's gotten to the point where, like, at least like here in New Hampshire, where I look at things strategically, it's like we're a purple state. We're as purple as they come. We elect a Republican governor with 70% landslide, with 2 Democratic congresswomen at the same time. In the meantime, though, libertarians control our state house. Like, the Libertarian Party might not have ballot access, but there's like there's a more Libertarian Party members than I can count on 2 hands who have just registered as Republican, gotten elected, and gotten into leadership, and now actually control the process of the legislation in the state. So why respect the other parties at all? Fuck it, Joe. Go run as a Democrat.
Well, I wouldn't run as a Democrat in the state of Idaho. Fuck that. But when it comes down to it, it's GOP.
Right? I think everybody can get down with this. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Hey, there used to be a whole caucus for that when the Libertarian Party was at its biggest and its best, and it had its biggest national conventions. There used to be a pineapple caucus. They didn't campaign, they didn't run candidates, they didn't involve themselves in inter-party politics. They just booked the biggest suite at the hotel for the convention.
And ordered pizza with pineapple on it. Yeah. No,
Was there a punch bowl with keys too?
Absolutely. And you know what? That was true liberty unity. That was true.
I'm sure the fuck it was.
You had the Prags, you had the Radical Caucus, you had the
I'm sure they were real radical.
Absolutely.
Now, the interesting thing here in Idaho is post Dobbs, the GOP went friggin' nuts. Right now we got a huge influx of Christian nationalists now. Patriot Front decided to pay a visit to one of our pride events. I mean, how bad is it when, the FBI starts showing up in their Patriot Front gear trying to pull people in, and they're using your state to do it, using a pride event in your state to do it.
We had a fun one. We had a drag queen story hour in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, at a private bookstore. And the Nazis said they were going to go protest, and we have legitimate Nazis. There's 6
Yeah.
of them. I can name all 6 of them. I've seen them enough at different events. They know me. They get mad when we show up. I'm like, I'm going to go film these guys being assholes. It's going to be hilarious. What I was not expecting as I'm filming these guys being assholes was Nick Sarwark and his 4 children walking right out the door in front of the camera from the drag queen story hour. And that is what the internet took away from the whole thing, was not the 6 Nazis being assholes. It's oh my God, he's stalking Nick Sarwark. I'm like, I didn't know he was there.
Well, you didn't expect him to be there, but yeah.
Yeah, kind of to that point. I think a lot of people are underestimating just how popular the right-wing narrative is now. I throw this out there all the time that the mainstream media is no longer MSNBC, CNN, and stuff like that. It's Joe Rogan, it's Tim Pool, all your favorite podcasts. They top the charts now. They've won. There's no more media war anymore. They have won. Their narratives are now officially out front and saturated in the culture. So every time I see this shit libs and TikTok, when people think that this is happening left and right, people full on reject this shit. And I think there's a hard swing back to the right that a lot of people are going to be sorry for.
It's gonna be a painful swing back to the right, because one of the things that I've taken from the past year or so is that the right's caught on to something I thought they never would. They haven't caught on to it in a way they've been able to actually take advantage of yet, but they've caught on to the fact that art and media matter more than politics and campaigns. Almost art and
media kind of sucks though.
No, they're terrible at it. They are not good at it. The left has controlled that for so long because that's where the creative people end up. Because let's face it, they don't want to fucking work. They get real creative on how to pay the bills. That's where they end up. But it matters because that's what pushes culture and pushes narrative. And I watched what's his name? The little movie. I can't remember his name right now off the top of my head. Tax protester. I should know his name. He came to Porkfest. I've met him. He just made a movie about the Jones Plantation movie. It's a terrible film. It's horrible. But my honest review is everyone needs to go watch it and support it because you know what, we're finally doing it. We're making a movie that shows how the plot of the movie is this guy's slaves are getting unruly, so he has to hire a consultant to come in and get his slaves under control. Mm-hmm. And the consultant happens to be a black dude who comes in and tells all the slaves, hey, you're free now, you run the plantation, you get to vote on who's in charge of the plantation, and then never tells them that they're actually still slaves. And the slaves just go along running the plantation for themselves. At least somebody's trying to make media that tells that story and teaches that narrative. It didn't go. I didn't like it. It was not good, but it's still worth supporting. But then now you see the right trying to capture media and art that they wasn't even intended for them. Look at this Richmond North of Richmond song.
Right, the Richmond North of Richmond.
Yeah. Well, okay, so you know what the takeaway from at least in my opinion, as a musician, is that
Yeah.
the reason why it's so popular is because he wrote about a theme. When you start dropping names and dates and stuff like that, it loses all relevance. So, like, you think about Eric July, who I like a lot, but his music had a shelf life because he was dropping people's names in the music, and it was just like so explicitly political that it lost a lot of the weight, you know, a year or two afterwards.
I'll draw two parallels here on using both Eric July and Oliver Anthony. I think Oliver Anthony tries really, really hard to be like the new Appalachian folk punk, the new Appalachian folk country that you get from like what's his face, Nose to the Grindstone, and like Feathered Indians. Like there's other artists out there that are doing that pure, raw, emotional Appalachian country, and it's awesome. It's killer music. I love it. His felt really forced to me, but it also, like, if you actually listen to it and you know the history of rural coal mining towns in Appalachia, like, that is a leftist union organizing song day in and day out, and the right is just like, this is ours now, we're taking it. Eric July, he was in another band before Backwards. They kicked him out because
Far from the Gods, correct?
Yeah, they kicked him out because he was hard to work with, and he kept trying to force politics into their music. And they replaced him with just another black libertarian who could sing, rap, and scream, and kind of looks like him, but started writing really good music.
You know what's funny is that actually I was going to get him on the show. Him and I DM back and forth, but he just stopped DMing me, unfortunately. But he's really good at writing about themes. He's not dropping names, and like he's a phenomenal singer. Like the 3 albums that they put out, absolutely fantastic front to back. And like the Backwards album is good, but I'm sorry, the Fire from
it doesn't have replay value. Like I've seen Backwards
exactly.
I've seen Backwards live twice, and I've listened to that whole album cover to cover once. Like there's a couple songs I go back to, like Self Ownership with Franz and Matilda. That's a great song. I can go back to that and listen to it. Fire from the Gods, I've listened to Excuse Me 1,000 times. The acoustic version, even. I just put it on loop. And it's the same message. And here's the killer part: is like I'm pretty sure Eric actually wrote that song. And they kicked him out before they recorded the final version of it. And it's like that is the one that got them over the edge. And he wrote it. Like one of the things I didn't like about Backwards album was Eric leaned too heavily into like the diss tracks and making arguments about everything, and like you said, name dropping and things that didn't become relevant. He wrote a diss track about Fire from the Gods. And complaining about how they got big off the song he wrote. Excuse me. Like, well, if everything else you wrote didn't suck to them, maybe you'd still be in the band.
Yeah, I mean, that's
and
I
like
point.
Eric, and I like Eric. I think his content's great. It really bothers me that in a world where Eric July exists, Maj Toure is the token we got stuck with.
But it's interesting because the music's always been the lead for the counterculture, right? You know, he had timeless music from the 70s, the anti-war movement, you know, Fortune, Son, Credence.
Exactly. That's like the ideal song that is about a theme about anti-war.
And Dale Gribble's cover of it is incredible.
You played it 50 years ago, you play it yesterday, you'll be able to play it in 20 years from now. You know, and people will still understand it.
When we're fighting the Chi-Coms.
Zombie.
You know, you saw Five Finger Death Punch try and replicate that. You know, a little method, but you know, they tried. You got some others that have done it, but it's like there's been so much control over music. You know, literally cultures be manipulated by the people who run the radio stations, that run the music industry. You know, you talk about black culture and you think black culture, well, that was the rap from, you know, the 90s. It's like, no, the rap from the 90s was manufactured, was created specifically to create an image of black people for black people, you know, that became a problem. You know, and this wasn't driven by black community. You saw the people who tried to take possession of the music industry, tried to take it back. You know, and they weren't allowed to. You know, so we're looking at this. We're still looking at the back and forth, but it's like most of the good counterculture music that we're seeing that's coming out, nobody knows about. It doesn't see the air unless somehow it goes viral, like Anthony did.
Well, here's the thing: Oliver Anthony for this. I do think he's an industry plant or planted or at least worked like to get where he was. I don't think it was a native viral success because he went on the record in an interview. He said that song, Richmond North of Richmond, was the first time he had ever been recorded with an actual microphone and camera. However, within 24 hours of that song hitting YouTube and getting to 40 million views, he has a 12-song album fully out. That's at least 2 months of studio work. Kyle can attest to put that out.
It's a lot of work.
That video was in the hands of every single right-wing influencer from Ben Shapiro to Dave Smith, and within minutes of it dropping, it was staged. Like there was a pre-release moratorium. It's like, hey, we got this thing, we're dropping it. It's that time of the election season. Things are going to hit up. And then it was the first question in the presidential debate. Was like, what do you feel about this song?
You know what? That when you put it that way, and that kind of slipped by me because I watched a Republican debate, and I didn't even like they said that, but now that you say that, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, and that he's on Joe Rogan, you know, no less, literally today. So there's no other way that things don't organize like that fast. I think a lot of people want to believe in like the superhero story in this kind of situation, but it's just not that.
We do.
Yeah.
You know, but again, it's one of those things. Justin, you talked about him being a plant, being an organized. Now, the thing is
I'm not saying he's not genuine. I'm not saying he's
not genuine. He's genuine. But from a perspective, you know, this doesn't have the timelessness.
No.
But it doesn't have the broader appeal. This isn't going to create a subculture.
What are the songs that are timeless? Like, look back. What are the actual timeless protest music? The timeless, like, protests that we've come up that we know will never go away. And it's always been from the left. It's never been from the right because it's always been about, like, working people struggle against the power. And this one, it might have some staying power, but I mean, it's already being parodied. Like, it's not "Zombie" by the Cranberries. It's not Creedence "Unfortunate Son." It's not even Rage.
Right. Not
like
that's sorrow. It's sad. It's this low anger. This, you know. Can't quite go victimhood with it, but it's, you know, it's like,
also it's not a personal, like, something you can relate to. Like "Zombie" by the Cranberries is one of my all-time favorite protests ever done, and it's timeless. It's so timeless that when Bad Wolves did a cover of it, they tried to update it. They changed one word in the entire song, and it was because when she wrote the song originally to make it work, she just repeated the word "bombs" twice in a lyric. They're like, oh, we'll just change one to "drones," and it works still. They just updated it for 2021.
2018. 2018.
Yeah. Well, and it's still timeless. Like, they didn't have to change a single goddamn word because a song that was written about the Irish people's struggles against British military occupation and an ongoing state of war through the 60s, 70s, and 80s is still relevant to 2020.
Well, it's relevant against the new empire that, you know, the sun never sets on their flag. You know, 60s, 70s, you still had British Empire global. You know, here it is in the 2000s. You know, we have an American flag stationed so many places around the globe, you know, being held there by military troops.
Coming to an end, Joe. Did you not see what the Deputy Secretary of Defense tweeted today?
No, I have not. What did he do?
She tweeted about her address at West Point. She went to West Point to address the future leaders of the United States Army today about how the real war of the future is against climate change because we can't train for joint operations with our allies if the base is flooded. We can't keep that installation running in a drought. Not like we don't have 20 years experience in desert warfare, but let's just say the United States Army has given up on training for suboptimal conditions. And if the future of the United States Army is waiting for the perfect day to fight, then the empire really has begun to fall. And I'm saying that with joyous glee as an Army veteran.
Well, absolutely. You know, and I recognize that. You know, my son ships off for the Air Force here on September 8th. My youngest daughter just asked me to sign the waiver so she could talk to a Marine recruiter at 17. And I'm like, dude, you know, they're going to find some nice cush jobs because they're smart kids. They're going to be far enough back from the lines. But I mean, still, they're in the service. They're wearing a uniform. They put a target on their back. These are my kids, and part of me feels like I failed because that's the choice they decided to make, looking for a future out of, they went with the poverty draft. That was their best option moving forward.
What you got to do, what you got to do is drive an up-armored lithium-ion battery into a firefight.
That's what the Cybertruck is. I swear to God, I want the Cybertruck, and there's no way in hell I can afford a Cybertruck. Couldn't afford to put.
Well, okay, I'll tell you what.
$60,000 deposit to try and get one. But when I first saw that design, when I first saw the design for that Cybertruck come out, the angle, it had the right angles, the right profile, the right shape. I'm like, this is a failed military bid. Like, he pitched this to the Army as a fucking vehicle.
Well, it was designed to be bulletproof, right? Right up until he tapped the window. Oops. But the thing is could you imagine going into one of those coastal countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, someplace where there's salt water freaking everywhere, and driving one of those lithium ions, and this isn't your standard car battery going into the ocean. This is a lithium ion battery hitting water.
Well, and the other thing is that those batteries actually are very, very sensitive to heat. So, like, the hotter an environment that a battery's in, the less life it actually has. And we're starting to now get, because I work for a GM dealership, we have the Cadillac Lyriq, which is a fully electric Cadillac, and they're actually kind of reasonably priced. Now, it's going to sound like a lot of money, but like $64,000 for a fully electric Cadillac SUV, I think that's actually pretty damn good for a Cadillac SUV. Yeah, fully electric, and I've driven them. They fucking they haul ass. They're actually pretty fucking.
A friend of mine has a Rivian, and that thing is just sex on wheels. And she fucking loves it. Like, she fucking hauls with it. But like, here's the thing. I spend way too much time on TikTok. I'll be the first to admit it. I fucking love the platform. The Chinese are good for one thing, and it's writing a good algorithm. But I stumbled upon a TikTok and I was watching it. It was an environmental scientist. This whole channel is all about, like, follow the science, wear your mask, get your vaccine, blah, blah, blah. Then he just goes on a rant about how horrible of an idea all these electric vehicle mandates are because of the rate of lithium mining and the rate at which lithium is actually pulled from the earth right now. In the number of operable lithium mines there are on the planet right now, there is not enough lithium being produced to create enough battery capacity just to meet California's demand for their 2035 mandate.
Yeah, well,
never mind Europe.
Right.
You know how they're getting around that, right?
China's buying Afghanistan from the Taliban in exchange for protecting their new poppy fields.
Well, in a sense, but the thing is all the city leaders right now, Democrats, Republicans alike, they're trying to shift to a new standard for the cars. Okay, they're going for the 35-mile-an-hour neighborhood electric vehicle.
Well, they're also trying to adjust the CAFE standards up. So one thing I actually talked about when I did Twitter Space last night was they're trying to reduce emissions at all costs. So, like, one of the things they did is actually converted over from you guys might remember some of the old refrigerant being like R12 back in the 90s. And then up in the late 90s, they went over to R134. So once they went from R12 to R134, those had what's called a global warming potential rating. R12 was rated at about 10,000, right? R134 was rated about 1,000. Now they've moved on to, and this has been since about 2012. I think GM, the first domestic vehicle was a 2012 Cadillac Escalade with 1234YF, and that's the newest refrigerant is 1234YF. And that has a global warming potential rating of like 2 or 3. But this stuff, like, in order to do, like, let's say you come into my shop with like an Acadia with front and rear AC, it is almost $500 to get your vehicle diagnosed for an AC leak. So they're trying to pull emissions in that respect. So, like, this stuff is less it doesn't emit as much emissions, and then also they removed the new car smell from cars. So what they found, yes, I'm not even kidding, what they would do is they would leave a brand new vehicle sit in a room all by itself after doing like the I think it's called like the 2040 testing, where they simulate a drive through California to measure like the gas mileage, the performance of the vehicle, and the emissions that come off of it. They leave the vehicle sit after doing this in a room for like 2 days, and they measure all the emissions that come off, like the paint, the plastic, and everything. And what they found is that new car smell emitted enough emissions that they could reduce reduce that by taking the new car smell out. So that was another way they got you on emissions. So believe me, I learned about this like 10 years ago. So you have to imagine they're still fucking chugging along ahead at this point.
So the worst part of all this climate change shit is that it's become a cult on both sides. You saw Vivek Megaswamy on stage during the vice president's debate, raise his hand and say climate change is a hoax. Fucking, it's absolute
the climate
hoax.
change agenda. The climate change agenda.
Fucking absolute hoax. Fucking no one listen to it. Yeah. But then you do have the agendaists who like this is the next thing. They're like they failed to lock you down with COVID. They're going to bring Greta back out of retirement next year. Like this is their next thing. Like. Unfortunately, what science is, it's not a reproducible. We don't have a second Earth. We can't run a controlled study. We don't know that what we're putting onto the Earth. You will never, ever be able to prove that any climate change is man-made or man-caused. You can prove the climate is changing, but we can also see a record of climate changing in these spikes and dips for tens of thousands of years throughout Earth's history. Is what we're doing now bad? I don't know. But what I do know is that pollution is probably not great. So maybe we could all agree to maybe take some steps to reduce pollution and reduce putting unnatural things into the environment and doing things like destroying coral reefs and building plastic islands in the middle of the ocean and getting to the point where we need air quality warnings on the morning news. But we can't have those discussions because people have divided this cult line between we have to do absolutely everything right now, or it's faking gay and don't listen to them.
Yeah, right.
Well, the interesting thing is we start to look at that culture divide, the culture between urban and suburban and rural. Okay, now we all recognize that urban culture it happens to result in the most human change simply because we got millions of people crammed into very small areas.
Right.
And you're starting to see this push for smaller transportation in the cities. Like I said, the neighborhood electric vehicles. They're going through the process of saying, okay, we can't keep selling Suburbans to everybody.
Not everybody can own an F-150 with a big old V8.
Especially electric Suburbans. The size of battery you need to put, we can't come up with enough lithium to keep creating electric Suburbans, so they got to shrink the size of the vehicles. So now you got these little neighborhood electric vehicles that they're making street legal so that everybody can tootle around town at 35 miles an hour, which is interesting in Idaho because you got the suburban culture. You got everybody driving around in their F-150s, and they're going to be driving on the same streets as these little 35 mile per hour.
Yeah, well, here's my question. When did suburban culture get to the point where we needed an F-150 Super Duty? Like, look, our grandparents...
It's a luxury.
Our grandparents built goddamn skyscrapers in New York off the equivalent of Ford Rangers and Chevy S10s. You don't need a goddamn 250 Super Duty with the fucking plow package.
No, dude, most of these people are throwing they're throwing tonneau covers on the back of it. They have big old mirrors on it. And what do?
They throw on the coal burner on top of it, so they can burn coal as they're driving through.
I'm rolling coal.
Well, like the Japanese, the most popular truck in Japan is a little fucking two-seater that's 10 feet long end to end, and they building skyscrapers with that as their working vehicle. That's the working vehicle of all of Korea and China, and they're outpacing us on industrial and manufacturing level and getting shit done. We're distracted by big and shiny, and we don't need it. And I'm not going to throw out numbers or cite anything because I can't remember the exact numbers or where I cited this, but I swear to God, I read something that it had to do with acceptable emission standards having to do with the size of the wheelbase. And by making the truck bigger, they could escape the regulations that they were putting back. So like, we want to put a more powerful and more fuel-efficient engine. We need to make a bigger wheelbase. So let's just make the F-50 bigger. All you need is a goddamn Ranger or S10, and those trucks last forever. I do remember seeing a project
even bigger than the Rangers from when I was a kid.
Yeah, the Ranger Raptor.
My brother just picked up a 2020 or 2018 Ford Ranger. And I'm looking at that, and that's twice the size of the Ranger when I was 18.
I remember 10 years ago, there was an open source design and construction project where they put out a thing. They're like, hey, here's a $10,000 prize if you can come up with a design for a functioning incubator for a premature infant using only parts from a Ford Ranger. Why? Because they were shipping that design to Africa, because all of these poor villages and even the cities in Africa, in war-torn Africa, they can't afford a $100,000 incubator for their hospital. But for some reason, every dumb fuck illiterate who owns nothing but an AR-15 and a Ford Ranger can keep it running for 30 years on that continent. And they did it. They built a working incubator that could save babies' lives just using the headlamp constructs from a fucking Ford Ranger. You don't need a Super Duty. I'm sorry.
Suburban necessity culture is the mother of all virtue.
Well, but that's one of the things. The Model T Ford, that was the go-to forever for the farms, because you churned butter with it. You milk cows with it.
Right.
You process the grain with it. You turn the wheat to flour with it. That little friggin' Model T Ford with a little belt on the back wheel. Everybody had one, and it was universal because all the parts were interchangeable.
Yeah. So one thing that a lot of the right wingers want to talk about, you brought up Vivek, when they talk about the climate change stuff, they always bring up, oh well, what about China's emissions and China's pollution? Well, you have to remember that they have 1 billion people who are actually productive over there, and therefore they're going to emit a lot more pollution.
Our jobs over there.
Protection aside, talking about China, talking about Africa. The biggest consumers of fossil fuel per capita right now isn't China, it's Africa. But how fucking racist is it for white privileged Americans to tell these developing countries that they're not allowed to use the cheap and readily accessible fuel that they have access to build their economy to the point that they can compete and hold standard with us? We did it. We got to where we are on the backbones of dead dinosaurs.
Well, it's because they're using Chinese roads and Chinese money.
The screwy thing about that is we literally had biofuels before Rockefeller friggin' went to U.S. legislature and made all that stuff illegal. We were running engines on alcohol. Mm-hmm. The bootleggers, they were running out of gas. They had conversions, turn around, take the stuff from the still, put it in the gas tank, boom, it would still go.
And then you get a NASCAR contract.
Yeah. That's how we got NASCAR. Yeah. The thing is, we've done all of this before. We know how to go back to bare bones. We understand because we've been there, or at least some of us have been there. We got a generation now that's so far removed from the farm. We got kids out on the street right now that don't know where their food comes from.
They come from Hannaford's or whole paychecks.
Yeah, Hannaford's. Yeah, Hannaford's.
Whole paychecks. That's a new one.
Why are you killing animals? You can just buy hamburger at the counter.
Just poke a little bit more.
Because Francis tastes better. You gotta give the animals a name.
Francis,
all right,
grass fed. But
I always say Peppa Pig if it's bacon.
I was trying to convince I have some friends that run a farm, and I was trying to convince their kids to name the pigs bacon, pork, and ham, and that did not go over well.
Crispy bacon, get your little pet pig, name him Crispy.
I got to say, I had an 8th grade teacher who, when he would talk about math, he would always like to use the example of killing animals. And I remember him saying that, oh, yeah, I was fucking, I fought years, so I was 15 years old. I remember him saying, yeah, I love animals. All right. I love them cooked, barbecued, grilled, you name it. He said parents would call and bitching about it. I'm like, I actually kind of like this guy. He's pretty cool.
That's the other thing. Parents call and bitching about kids. Like, that teacher that was throwing a fit about the patch, the Gadsden
flag, yeah.
Dude, when Jared Polis has to chime in and say, no, you've gotten too woke, you've gotten too woke. When the gay Democrat governor of the state has to get involved and say, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not racist. You've gone too fucking far. I remember, I swear to God, my freshman, when I was in high school, I remember the date. It was October 10th, 2003. I will never fucking forget this. Because it was the 10-year anniversary of the Battle of Mogadishu, Black Hawk Down movie. My history teacher was a retired Army Ranger, 75th Ranger Regiment. He was in Mogadishu. Never fucking talked about it or brought it up. And then said till that fucking day, he walked into class in his full dress green Army uniform, got badges out the ass, everything. And we were a rowdy class of high schoolers, and he just says, all right, It's been 10 years since I killed anybody. Which one of you stupid fucks wants to push your luck today? That was the best behaved class for the rest of the year. He'd be fired in an instant today. And I keep in touch with him. He is retired now from teaching, and he writes children's books.
My kind of guy, it sounds like. Jesus.
But when did teachers get so soft that they can't make jokes about killing animals and feeding yourself to do your math lesson or threaten students for misbehaving?
I blame 1980.
1980.
We went to, the federal cabinet office of indoctrination. The second education became a cabinet, and we had a secretary. That was the death knell of it, because from there, everything, we started seeing, kids that were going to grow up and work in factories were getting the exact same education as kids were going to grow up and work on the farm. And it's like, no, these kids need an education that will teach them to succeed in the communities they grow up in. Okay. There aren't any auto factories or auto unions in mine country. There aren't, farms in coal country.
But
you need education for the kids.
I had a discussion exactly about this with a friend yesterday, just out of the blue, random, and it started as a joke because he found a YouTube video of somebody walking into a Walmart in Alabama, and just going up to everybody randomly in the Walmart and saying, "Are you married to your cousin?" And it only took him 3 tries to find somebody who said yes. And I started to think about it. I'm trying to rationalize this. This can't just be Alabama. It's like an old world thing. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it's the same reason I don't respect a lot of anarchist philosophy. I say this as an anarchist, but why should we take cues on how to run society from people who died before the internet was ever a thought? They don't no anarchist philosopher that we're basing our philosophy off of ever envisioned a world that was interconnected and intercommunicative as we have today. But the reality is, for a lot of these poor towns in Appalachia, especially the mining country, there was a point in time where a man would die of old age on the 3rd floor bedroom of the house his great-grandfather built with his own hands, and nobody in that family had ever left that county. Cousin just went neighbor at one point. If it weren't for World War II, if it weren't for World War II, the Korean War, and Vietnam, a lot of these kids would have never gotten the chance to leave those counties up until that point either. So do we live in that same world as we used to back then? Absolutely. All the education you needed in mining country, you got in mining country. But we don't live in that world anymore.
But at the same time, still sort of do, because 70% of Americans are still going to die within 50 miles of where they grew up. They're not going to leave their hometown. They're not going to leave where they were born. They're going to keep coming back. You got your prodigal sons all over the place, whether they join the military or not. 70% of them are going to die within 50 miles of where they grew up. So set them up for success in the community based on what's going on in that country or in that county. You want kids to be able to be successful where they want to live, where they want to stay.
Sure, absolutely. I get that. And I'm never going to argue against the localization of education and whatnot, because that's everything we fight for. Most of my friends homeschool their kids. It's a community that matters more than the Board of Education. The federal Department of Education needs to be abolished because top-down standards don't work. But I still think back, again, I'm going to circle right back to art and media. One of my favorite films, October Sky. What about the kids who want to get out? How do you give them a chance?
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of tough. And my wife and I kind of talked about this because we were going to move to Florida about 2 years ago. And, if you go from a state like Pennsylvania, where real estate is dirt cheap, to a state like Florida, where real estate's starting to get more expensive, it's hard to, sell a house like I have for less than 6 figures and move to a house down in Florida that is in the 6 figures easy. Your economic mobility from places like where I live, it's very, very difficult. And don't get me wrong, I still make good money for what I do, and I'd make good money down there, but still there's the getting from here to there is the big struggle without having ass loads of cash sitting in the bank. A lot of people do.
I had it off cuff. A friend of mine up here in New Hampshire, a TikTok came across, and it was this girl complaining about how difficult it was to make ends meet and how she'd been getting by fine on $15 an hour and how like with her like $600 for rent, blah 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 blah. And everyone's like, where the hell can anybody rent something for $600 a month? I'm like, Pittsburgh.
Like, dude, I had a garage.
You think about what neighborhood she's living in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, not here, not in New Hampshire. $600 won't get you a couch, but Pittsburgh, I pulled up Zillow. I'm like, here, look, a 1-bedroom for $700.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in a garage apartment literally a block away from here for $495 a month and paid like 2 bills. And I had 2 bedrooms, a nice bathroom, a whole downstairs, and a garage I could put my car in for fucking probably $700 a month. I mean, granted, this was about 8 years ago, but like the house I live in now, my mortgage is $700 a month for a 3-bedroom, 3-floor, 3-car garage out back, 1.5 car on the bottom. Not a huge yard, but a decent enough yard that my dogs, when I let them out, they can run around a little bit. Like all that for under $100,000. Come on. But once again, if I want to move somewhere, I'm not going to get anywhere near the same quality of house in any other state, or at least none that I can think of.
Not outside the Midwest, maybe Ohio or like Kentucky or Tennessee or something. But again, it's like your economic mobility is limiting you to Appalachia and kind of coal country and manufacturing country. Like Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, you got a little bit of manufacturing to hold up those cities. You still got like 1 or 2 functioning mills.
There's one actually in the town that I grew up in. I remember when they tore down the old mill. I'll never forget, because like this town was like 2 whole blocks, right? So you could stand on like the way other end of the block of like the 2 blocks, and all you would see is the mill standing up super high. And I remember when they tore it all down, it just reminded me of like a doomsday kind of scene, because it was so like blank and bare. And then they put a new mill back up, and then it just kind of had that same vibe again. But yeah, there was a giant steel mill town. And then even like the town that I live in now, Vandergrift, it was, I think they said it was the first worker built town in all of America, and there's a mill right over the hill from me. So
yeah, but that's what it was. Like that area of the country was built by union mine workers and union mill workers, and everything was built to their standards of what they could afford. I'm up here in New England. This shit was all built by landlords.
Unions. It was built by unions who had to fight company towns.
Yeah,
because it was working for the company store. That's another one that's about to start coming back. Now that we start, we're bringing back the company town. Meta's building towns around.
I got in an argument with again, I am terrible with names. This is she's Cato, one of the a lady from Fee, and she's a sweetheart, super nice. She writes about school choice a lot, and she's like brilliant. But I got in a huge argument with her once when she posted an article about like the future of education being company sponsored learning pods. I'm like, so now you're gonna tie your children's education, like we were already tying your healthcare to your employer. Now you want to tie your children's educational benefits to your employer, and then you're talking about like the employer sponsored residences as well. I'm like, this is a fucking company town. At which point sure, you're being compensated, you're getting a salary, but you're a slave because you can't leave, because the salary is not what's keeping you there. It's your children's education, it's your children's social welfare,
education, your housing, your medical care. Everything's owned by the company again. And it's like you're just a slave that's been told they can vote for who rules them.
Yeah, like the Jones plantation
for them.
Yeah, Dodge versus Ford Motor Company, Richard Nixon and the right to work destroyed American industrial supremacy. And ID got so messed up from the influx of CA, moved from there only to get a worse area affected by CA and AZ. I feel like that's probably happening in Texas too, because I remember even like a couple of years ago, everybody saying they're moving to Texas from California. So I mean, I have to imagine that some of those areas down in Texas are probably getting like
it's destroyed. Our biggest fear. Our biggest fear in New Hampshire is massholes coming over the border. Me and Bill Barger went to our Sky Show.
You got Massachusetts there, so that's going to happen anyway.
Well, like we were interviewing people left and right, and we'd start off a gimmick like, do you think we should split Manchester into 2 cities? Well, like we should build a wall on the river to separate East and West Manchester. It's like, okay, how about building a wall on the Massachusetts border? And then people were like, you know what, maybe. Like that one, like maybe we should keep the massholes out. Like we have signs in Nashville. It's like, welcome to New Hampshire. At the end of a New Hampshire. Like it's signs in French, Spanish, and then it's like, don't mass it up. Like right there, right behind it. It's like, that's our big fear. But like we went from like, it's been like 6 years from when Texas was a guaranteed deep red state to all of a sudden Beto O'Rourke has a chance?
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but yeah.
The thing is what Elspinner mentioned there about Idaho, getting messed up. Because we had two types of Californians that moved here. Okay. We had the liberal Californians that were still looking for someplace cheap that they could afford after they got rich off of, busted .coms, and other things. They made their money. They moved where it was cheap. Prices went up on everything. The other people we have coming here are the Californians, with a which is the truth. We ended up with a bunch of Christian nationalists and dominionists under the world rapture, Seven Mountains holy rollers.
Let me guess, everything's Revelations.
Oh, dude. We need to hurry up and bring on the ends of times by, and it's like one of the weirdest things because you got Christians deliberately making life miserable for people.
Joe, I'm gonna give you a pitch here. You might not like it, but we need to get you out to New Hampshire as soon as possible because we're gonna just cede Idaho to these people. Like if you go deep enough, if you look up Free State Project and you go deep enough into the YouTube and the Google search, which I've done because I like to see what's being written about us, you eventually find the Free State Project of Idaho, which is an explicitly white nationalist, Christian nationalist movement to get ethno-neo-Nazis to move to Idaho to colonize Idaho. Like, they're open about what they're doing. Here's the thing. I think they deserve a homeland too. Idaho can be their Israel, but we need y'all to come here to New Hampshire to build the libertarian Israel.
And thing is we did that once. We had the Aryan Nation compound up in Hayden Lake. And it's like, as long as they stay in Hayden Lake,
right, yeah, stay in your spot.
What's the problem? Because they had their nice little covenant commune and they did whatever they did, when nobody needed to know.
Yeah.
Because when they started exporting all that violence off of the compound into town and into the communities, and that's the problem we're having here in Idaho right now.
That's when you shoot back.
Yeah. I mean, you could just
and they're forcing out the residents. I mean, it's straight up recolonization again. The invaders are coming in and they've decided that they want what they want.
No, it's not colonization anymore. It's gentrification.
Gentrification.
Use your proper terminology.
Just leave the Nazis burn some crosses in their yard up the road. As long as they're not harming anybody, just makes a little bit of smoke and leave them be. Don't get the neighborhood person shot.
It's on their side of the fence. Whatever, guys.
Listen, you want to get rid of the poor Nazis? Build a Starbucks.
Be a lot of traffic.
You'll get a different kind of racist, but
that's all right. All we need to do is let fentanyl into the compound, and that'll be taken care of in short order.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Well, you know what? Now the Republicans are all about that. And I've touched on that a decent bit. I mean, like, some of the numbers are thrown out there. I don't know where they're picking up these numbers of saying 300 people a day. All the numbers I looked at. Yeah, it seems very high, actually. I don't even think there were that many people in the state at the time. But no, I think that some of the numbers I found, I think it was like 176 a day or like 150 or something like that, which, don't get me wrong, one is still too many, but like, the Republicans are all about the fucking drug war again. I'm like, really? We're going to try like 1982 again?
Here's the thing. It's like, one, yeah, the Republicans are retarded. The drug war is never going to be won. You're never going to win that fight. But like, the pullout of Afghanistan is kind of responsible for this. Now, the invasion of Afghanistan was largely responsible for the upswing in the heroin epidemic. Like, you make readily available poppy in the largest poppy growing region of the world, now guarded by the U.S. military to supply Purdue Pharma to push MS Contin all over Appalachia. Yeah, you get a fucking epidemic, but then you pull out and the Taliban takes over and they re-illegalize growing poppy and start executing anyone they catch making heroin. And now there's no more import stream from Afghanistan to the United States for heroin, which was the largest import stream in the world. What are they going to fill it with? Well, fentanyl's fucking really easy to make, really cheap to make, packs a way bigger punch, easier to ship, and it's marginally safer to handle and to distribute. And I don't know if you've ever had it in a medical setting. I have been in a medical setting where I've been given fentanyl. and I was in the worst pain of my life. I had multiple broken ribs, internal bleeding, collapsing lung. Like, it was bad accident. And doctor's like, I'm going to give you a fentanyl drip. And I watched him press that drip button and felt the warm go up my arm and down my body. And the first thing I thought of was like, oh, that's why people do heroin. Like, I get it now. Like,
oh yeah,
people aren't looking for heroin anymore. They're looking for fentanyl. It's not a problem of the heroin being dosed and cut with fentanyl. It's a problem with the demand is now just seeking fentanyl because it's a better and cleaner high.
Mm-hmm. Jesus.
But it's still street, so your quality sucks.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we end up with ODs all the time. You know,
right? And like, I hate to say it, like one thing I will account to a failure of libertarian policy. One of the first successes the Free State Project had in New Hampshire early on after we got rid of knife laws was one of our Democrat state reps, a Free Stater who ran for office as a Democrat, got a bunch of harm reduction bills passed, got a needle exchange program passed, started pushing for decrim of these things to help addicts. And what has led to is enablement. We're not helping anyone. We're not. We're seeing. I follow the needle on my off time. I'm trying to make a little short film about the homeless epidemic and the industrial complex that's surrounding it. I followed this needle exchange van around Manchester, New Hampshire the other day. I watched them just handing out needles. They're not collecting any. They're just handing them out. They're enabling these people. And it's the same fucking people. But the shelter's only open until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. They're not actually helping anyone get off the street. They're not actually helping anybody get clean. They're not actually trying to find the source of these drugs. They're not helping anybody test them for cleanliness. They're not helping anyone do them in a safe or responsible manner. They're just saying, all right, harm reduction means like you're allowed to kill yourself on the sidewalk you're homesteading now. And it's been an actual failure of libertarian policy in my mind.
Yeah, well, but that's the same problem they're having in Portland and Seattle right now. Is because they went with the decriminalization, but they didn't authorize education and or safe means. You know, we have no shortage of nonprofit organizations. They're willing to go into areas and teach safe use, educate people on why it's bad in the first place. You know, work on getting people off the street so they stop seeking escapes. You know, but if you don't do that in the way Portugal did it, you end up with shitstorms like Portland, where literally nobody knows how to get out of the cycle. So all they know how to do is repeat the cycle, and they're handing them the keys to keep the cycle going.
Well, and they're also incentivized to do it. It's a system of perverse incentives because all of these nonprofits are being funded by grants from tax money in the federal government who fund them based on the number of people they're taking care of, not based on the number of people that they're getting off the streets, but the number of beds they have filled every night. They're incentive. And when you actually break down, one of the ones I'm trying to investigate is New Horizons. They're a food bank in here in Manchester, New Hampshire, that has over 60% of their grant revenue goes to payroll, not to services to help the employees, but to payroll for all of these liberal arts social services majors who all they have to do is work for a nonprofit for 5 years while making minimum payments on their student loans for the federal government to come in and say, oh, you did federal service and wipe out their student loan balance. This is a redistribution to the educated class and laundering money through the guise of a nonprofit, all at the expense of the working poor. Because you know who doesn't get help at the food bank? The single father who's working 9 to 5 to try and keep a roof over his kid's head. You know who doesn't get help at the shelter? The kid who's actually working at that fast food joint to try and save up money to get off the street because his shift runs till 6:30 and he wasn't there to check in by curfew. They're not helping people. They're enabling the people who don't want help and hurting the people who need it.
You know, New Horizons is one of those that's like that because they're using federal money. Federal money has specific requirements. Nobody can spend 24 hours in a facility. You have to kick them out at 7 o'clock in the morning. You got to check them in at 5 o'clock in the evening. Okay, that means that there's this window where you can't help them. You know, which means they're destabilized. They got to find someplace else to store their stuff. They don't have a door they can lock. Okay, now they've been working on some things. SHIP, which is for veterans, has been working on veteran housing where the affordable housing Fair Cloth Act went and terminated the ability of states and cities to do the affordable housing, run their own low-income housing. And so we don't have low-income housing that the city can do to get homeless people off the street anymore. But they started creating other organizations like SHIP and some others that are trying to pick up the slack with specific groups because they're helping veterans or they're helping some other marginalized group. They're not just helping the poor. So they found ways around the Fair Cloth Act to make sure that housing's been available. We got Valor Point, which is a homeless shelter for veterans here in the state, but we keep running into that same problem. All of them have this mandatory threshold, which means low threshold facilities, like our interfaith sanctuary that we have here in Boise. They'll take anybody in, give them a place to stay, let them stay 24 hours. It has to be entirely privately funded because the second a federal dollar enters into that system, they got to go back to the old way of keeping them destabilized so that they continue to process and make the numbers so that the problem continues to exist.
I had a buddy.
Problem, like you said, because I'm playing the homeless thing right now. Homelessness, it's big business. It really is. Out in Idaho, states, vultures wearing angel wings. No shit. But I'm playing that homeless thing right now. I got a job that works from 8 to 5. Okay. I can't hit a food bank because the food banks are open from 9 to 2. By the time I'm off at 5 and I'm able to get down to the homeless shelter to try and get homeless, a bed for the night. Not that I ever want to. My van's hooking me up pretty good right now. I'm too late to get to the front of the line and make sure I got a bed. So we keep running into this problem. And I'm working. And because I'm working, that cuts me out of a whole nother, set of funding opportunities for nonprofit organizations.
Right.
Sorry, you make too much for the threshold. You're making $50,000 a year. Well, we're sorry that the state's taking $20,000 of that. Because you got your back child support that's pulling $1,000 out a month, and because your credit went south while COVID was on. Now that you're actually working again, and everybody started collections again, that part of your disposable. So it's like I don't even have enough disposable income right now to meet requirements for one bedroom apartment here in the state. So I'm working homeless poor.
Right, but there's no money in helping you.
Go ahead.
That's the thing is, it wouldn't take much to help someone in your situation, but there's no money in it for them to help somebody in that situation. And there's specific perverse incentives to get them out of it. About a decade ago, I had somebody, a good friend, back a little more than a decade. I was still in the Army when this happened. I was not in the best position. I couldn't take anyone in. I didn't even have a couch for somebody to fucking crash on at the time. But I had a friend who was going through a real rough spot, getting jodied, divorced, suicidal, caught him with fucking needles in his arm, needed to get him into a shelter, and the veteran shelter in Worcester, Massachusetts wouldn't take him in because he had a car.
Yeah.
That was it.
So they essentially want you to sleep in your car then.
Sure, which is understandable. If you're limited on beds, that is they would. If you sell your car, they'll go out of their way to make sure you have a bed for a week or two. Mm-hmm. They'll make you pay for
it. Get rid of your car.
Yeah.
And which means now you got to be within walking distance or mass transit of your work if you want to stay employed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So the one thing that my wife has always brought up because she's an EMT. Is like the Narcan stuff where she says that she constantly sees people over and over, the same people getting Narcan. Yeah. Where like at a certain point, like I'm completely against the death penalty, but like,
well, I'm not against Darwinism.
No, neither am I. If you're going to sit there and you're going to continue to shoot up, then why should taxpayers have to bail you out medically if you're choosing to do this constantly? Like if you get better, all the support for you. I'm sure you guys know Drew, the clean libertarian. I mean, he's a great dude and he does great harm reduction work. But like the idea of just constantly giving people their next shot of Narcan so that way they can, be good for a day or two, get their fix and go back to being out. We shouldn't have to support that.
If it wasn't such a prolific problem, if we weren't dealing with actual epidemic level proportions of need of response to opioid overdoses, then what I would say, like, sure, here's our harm reduction. We're gonna open a fucking crack house. It's gonna be across the street from the fucking fire department. If you OD in that crack house, we'll give you some Narcan. Anywhere else in the city, we can't afford to divert the resources.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to want to go in there? Like, you're going to see the worst of the worst, but like you said, Darwinism, the people who are going to go in there are people that you probably don't want in your city anyways.
Sure. Well, here's the thing. We've seen the effects of, like, again, competing incentives. When Massachusetts first started decrim of everything, and they're like, "We're fuck this." It was Lawrence and Methuen, Massachusetts. Now the fentanyl capital of North America, Lawrence, Massachusetts. By the way, everything runs through there. It can ship to New York, to Lawrence for distribution. But at one point, back when I still lived in Massachusetts, the police chief of Lawrence and Methuen came up together in a joint press conference and said, "We are no longer going to prosecute any drug-related charges. It's not worth our time. It's not worth our money. It costs us too much. There's no net positive. However, if you call 911 for an overdose, we will send an ambulance and no police cruiser. There will be no consequences." What they saw was people were more willing to engage with the social services, the emergency services, and the EMTs, and lives were saved. And it led to people getting into treatment and getting off the streets, because they started to build a bridge of trust between the EMTs and the paramedics and the medical professionals and the addict community that had sprung up there. And then what happened was, after 6 months of this, getting hundreds of people off the streets and into treatment programs, because the police chief in Methuen established a scholarship program where he took their drug prosecution budget and put it into a scholarship for rehab. If anybody came forward and said, "We want that," they got hundreds of people off the streets, saved tens of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money in prosecution costs. The DEA opened a field office and started running scanners. Anytime somebody called 911, it was a race. If the fucking local paramedics got there first, they got treatment. If the DEA got there first, they got arrested. The problem got doubled down and got worse.
Wow.
The DEA in a half a year undid all of the positive harm reduction that had actually taken place.
Jesus Christ.
Fucking feds.
Yeah. But it all came down to trust. It was a rare instance of a public servant police officer coming up with a good idea that maybe, just fucking maybe, policing would work more effectively if there was trust between the community and the police.
Mm.
So.
Jesus. Well, since we're at about an hour now, I want to pivot over to the Libertarian Party stuff. So, yeah.
We were already talking about a shit show. Let's just dive into something worse.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about a crack house a second ago, so I don't know. It's pretty synonymous, if you ask me. Joe, I know you were running for Congress a couple years ago.
Right.
You kind of got
I ran for Congress twice. The second time I ran, after Reno Reset, the guys who had snaked leadership of the Idaho LP took over. They ran screaming, straight to the guys, to the Republican lobbyists, and started crawling into bed with them and sucking their cocks. And it was like, fuck this shit. So I said, no, I'm not playing this game for you guys. I'm not using my credentials to recruit for your shitstorm. Fuck off. Find somebody to replace me or you're going to lose ballot access. They found somebody to replace me. I'm still waiting for fallout on that because he never fucking filed his FEC. He didn't make any money, so the filing would have been a null and void anyway. But it's.
Well, I don't think you're actually required to file unless you expect to raise or spend more than $5,000.
And that's an interesting thing because some people expect you to file, just file, start. Send your update. Say, nope, not $5,000 yet. Not $5,000 yet. Not $5,000 yet.
If you file a Form 1 or a Form 2, like, you'll get an email every quarter saying, if you haven't met the threshold, ignore this email. You don't even have to tell them you haven't raised anything yet. You just ignore it. It's like, I filed a fair bit of FEC forms in my time. It's not that hard to do, but like I don't think you're actually required to, because it does say, like, like I just did one the other night, and it said you're not required to do this unless you expect to raise or spend
Flawed.
dollars.
Okay, so Joe, it sounds like you got kind of railroaded by the LPMC, and I know Reed and I talked about this a little bit about how we're both kind of like, man, why is the LP going after Joe when like Joe's a good dude? But you know, I guess I don't know. Are you not right wing enough? Do you not pander to right wingers? And I know people are going to cringe or think I'm a progressive when I say that, but like, let's be honest here. The LPMC does completely pander to right wingers.
They tried to cancel me and Reed for doing a show with Joe. And like that was the end of the BC Caucus liking me. I'm like, no, fuck you.
Yeah.
Like, no, a lot of it was our vice chair. You know, he started showing up protesting pride events. You know, he showed up with the Christian nationalists protesting pride events. You know, he showed up at forced birth rallies. You know, holding the aborted kids sign all chopped and diced. And it's like, dude, where are you with this whole bodily autonomy thing? You know, we agree abortion's bad, but it's not up to the state to decide that shit. You know, he's going, no. There are things I want the state to do for me. And it's like, that ain't, no.
You've accepted that standard. You've accepted the standard of there are things we want the state to do for us if you've accepted participation with the Libertarian Party. Because, like, Karen Ann Harless can bitch all she wants with the Dallas Accord, saying that we're agnostic about the existence of the state. But the fact is we're participating in the state mechanisms to try and change the state mechanisms. I am an anarchist. I run on anarchist platforms. I talk about anarchist shit all the time. If I get involved in government, I have accepted the role of government to a degree. Once you've accepted the role of government to a degree, then all of a sudden it's not a question of, are you a forced birth extremist? Are you a pro-choice extremist? Can you go to these rallies, whatnot? The question is, what's the official position of the party? And are you there as the vice chair or as an individual?
Yeah.
Right.
That's the question I'd have for him. Are you going to these protest Planned Parenthood as an individual, or are you going to hand out LP literature there and say you're with the Libertarian Party of Idaho? Well, that's not part of the platform.
Right.
Yeah. But the thing is when he shows up on social media talking about who he is within the party, right, and then he goes out and presents himself in these positions, it's like, how do you separate the two?
I asked Dave Smith that question, and he assures me it's natural. He assures me that being the spokesperson for the party and him endorsing all the rabid Taiwan-loving Republican Israelites was totally different things. So playing by their rules, there should be a difference.
Right.
One of those things, I looked at that and went, no, I turned towards anarchy. I want to be able to divest the government of power. I want to give it back to the people. And I have people saying, no, I need the government to exist because I want them to enforce my moral judgments. I was like,
here's the thing, that is the role of government. The reality is the role of government, should it exist, is to enforce a moral standard. Like, we can talk about how we think that the role of government should be the protection of life, liberty, and property, but what's that? That's a moral standard. And that's a moral standard that's up to a lot of interpretation and vagueness. Life, liberty, and property. Like, are you going to take the Walter Block approach that abortion is evictionism and is property rights at its most fundamental? Or are you going to take approaches to say the right to life supersedes another's right to property, that your right to your own body is superseded by the right to the life growing inside you to a woman? Like, there's a lot of fucking nuance there.
Oh, there is. There absolutely is.
But we shouldn't be going down those fucking rabbit holes as a political entity or organization, because it solves nothing.
Right. And my thought on this has always been that I am pro-life. But I recognize the struggle about this issue, and I don't think you're ever going to get a large consensus on this. So I think
which is
the most reasonable compromise in my mind would be like first trimester only. I think the vast majority of people will say that's a reasonable standard, and you'll make the most amount of people happy. Now, once again, if it was up to me, I'm pro-life as it gets, but I I understand that you can have reasonable disagreements on this because people, they kind of come to their conclusion of like when life begins at a different point. But once again, this isn't for the government or anybody to decide. And when you start wanting to say like we want the government to enforce this, that it's
for the government to decide. That's my whole point. Is it is for the government to decide. If you've accepted the role of a government, this is one of the things for the to decide. And from the vice presidential debate the other night, this is what I'm calling it. It was a vice presidential debate.
Took me a second.
I gained a little bit of respect for fucking whatever his name, North Dakota guy. Who was
Doug Burgum, I think.
Yeah, who paid his way to be on the stage.
That'd be a hefty fine.
No, he paid college students $20 for every $1 donation they recruited, so he could get to the 30,000.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Ooh,
really? Yeah. Well, he's a billionaire.
Yeah,
he's a tech billionaire. He sold a startup to freaking Microsoft in the 90s.
Okay, so he's good.
Yeah. Everyone else is like, ban abortion, ban abortion, ban abortion. Nikki Haley's like, wow, maybe like 10 weeks or something, we should ban abortion. And then Doug Vernon just reaches into his pocket, pulls out a copy of the Constitution, and says, 10th Amendment, not up to us. Sorry, sucks.
Right.
Let the states decide. Like, but even that argument acknowledges that there's a role for a state to decide. And Texas, Tennessee, New York, Massachusetts, they're all going to have different determinations on where and when that is. And is that going to lead to cross-border migration? Probably more than cannabis does.
Dude, it is. And that's one of the things we got going on here in Idaho. Idaho has one of the most restrictive abortion laws, and our GOP legislature, our Dominionists, bring on the end of the world rapture freaks, who literally declared within the GOP party, the GOP party's position in the state of Idaho is death before abortion. Death before abortion.
Well, you just respond with what's the difference. But
well, yeah.
But this is actually, I think, one of the heart of the issues with the LPMC. And what happened with the Libertarian Party is two things. It's the abortion plank and the bigotry plank. It comes back to those two things from the beginning. And both of them, from 1,000-foot view, looking down, are 100% inconsequential and meaningless changes. But they were so fucking autistic about the way they went about doing it that they alienated and divided the entire party behind them. So, like the abortion plank, I actually think the Mises Caucus was right. Getting rid of the abortion plank was the right thing to do because the Libertarian Party had a wishy-washy kind of fucking take on being pro-choice. I'm like, you were either explicitly pro-choice or you were leaving it up to that flank at the end of the platform says if we didn't cover it, it doesn't mean we have a position. We might just have no position. We don't have a fucking position. You don't have to take a position saying you don't have a fucking position. That plank had to go. It was poorly written. It was a weak argument for
it needed to be rewritten, and it needed to be rewritten under natural law. It needed to be rewritten under philosophy.
Here's the thing. I would have respected them more if they tried to replace it with a pro-life plank. Like, if your argument was that we aren't pro-choice, sure, replace it with a pro-life plank. But if your argument is we have no say whatsoever, delete the whole thing, 100%.
Well, I mean, the thing is they were the Libertarian Party. To be libertarian is to be pro-choice. As long as you don't hurt or harm anybody else, to be libertarian.
And that's the history of the party. It's really from the 1980s, since the 1980s, like up in like Gary Johnson might have been the first libertarian presidential candidate to run on a platform of something other than pro-choice on everything. Like from the Koch brothers in the 70s up to Gary Johnson 2012, if you look back, everything was branded pro-choice on everything.
Right.
Like that was the party's history. But like, yeah, no, if you want to get rid of it, get rid of it. We have a plank that says there are some things we don't take up positions on. I respect not taking a position. And the original plank was stupid. The bigotry plank, here's the craziest part. That was horribly worded too. Fucking the bigotry is a rational republic. Here's the crazy part. The plank that was placed with in Reno, written by Spike Cohen, not by the Mises Caucus, is a way better plank. And it's much stronger language in opposition to state systems of bigotry and racism. But they made such a big stink in a fight about it that you got fucking Gold Wedge and fake Rotarians who still won't shut the fuck up about, well, you say bigotry is irrational and repugnant. Well, you say bigotry is irrational and repugnant. Well, you say bigotry is irrational and repugnant. No, I won't. You know why? Because bigotry is incredibly rational. It makes a lot of sense when you understand why people fucking hate each other. It is repugnant, but guess what? People are allowed to be repugnant. You know who's not allowed to be repugnant? The state.
Mm-hmm.
No, they aren't.
Right. So, Justin, you seem to be one of the more vocal critics, even of like the Dave Smith stuff. Now, Joe, maybe your stuff just doesn't come from my algorithm, but like, it seemed like you were a little bit more just kind of like, hey, I'm going to do my thing and keep rocking and rolling, as to where Justin was very, very vocal about his critiques from very, very early on.
I had a lot of libertarian type things I was still doing. I was still involved in the anti-war thing. I was still talking to, bring our troops home and about defend the guard and doing things like that. I was very much involved in the legalization of medical marijuana here in the state of Idaho. And people give me shit. Why don't you just go full deep? Well, no, because people in Idaho are only prepared to go medical.
Yeah.
So we work with what the community wants.
We haven't gotten full legalization in New Hampshire. Yeah, we haven't been able to get full legalization in New Hampshire because we're too red. And we've had full decrim for like a fucking decade. There's no way Idaho is Montana are ready for it.
But it's one of those things. We take a look at the things, and it's like 80%, 70% of the state will support a medical program. 40% will support recreational, which means it's not going to happen. 80% will support personal use, reduce it to an infraction, write them a freaking ticket and call it good. You can't sell it, but, if they're not carrying a lot, let it go. So I still had the things I was doing. So for me, it was like, okay, you guys go play your games. I'll let you guys go do what you're going to do. I'm going to continue to focus on the anti-war effort. I'm going to continue to focus on medical marijuana. I'm going to continue to focus on reproductive rights because that's the community I'm involved in. I'm involved in people who need the ability to make medically necessary decisions based on information that the state will never and should never, ever fucking have.
Right.
Okay? That's it. Patient autonomy, medical choice. Do what you need to do based on the information you have at the time you need to make the decision. Because the state doesn't know what the fuck's going on with you.
Funnily, like when the Idaho shit first started going south and they had their little fucking coup and schism and everything, me and Joe actually had a conversation. I told him straight up, like, walk away. You're doing better work than them. Just do it on your own.
Yeah.
I've been vocal within the Libertarian Party, as opposed to just walking away and doing it myself, because what's been going on in the Libertarian Party and the Mises Caucus has affected what I've been doing. It hasn't affected Joe. Joe's work is community-based. He can keep going and just fucking worry about Idaho.
Right.
I served 2 terms on the LMNT. I was a campaign manager for a statewide campaign. I'm one of the ballot access coordinators for the whole fucking country. I'm one of only 3 people who successfully run a statewide ballot access campaign in New Hampshire. And I've done it 3 times. The other 2 have only done it once each. So this stuff was actually affecting me, and I had no choice but to be vocal. The amount of times I've tried to walk away, I got a group chat with Reed and Joe. The amount of times I've threatened, I'm gonna kill everyone and just fucking leave. Something's gonna blow up. Unbelievable. Weekly I threatened to walk away. I'm not doing this. Now I have no involvement with LPNH whatsoever anymore at all, except every once in a while, some of them will say, hey, we have a funny idea for a video. And they'll tell me the idea for the video. And I'll be like, all right, that's pretty funny. I'll edit it for you.
Okay, so you're no longer involvement with LPNH. That isn't because of the main guys Reed, Jeremy, Eric.
I'm good friends with all of them.
Right.
Still. And no, it's because we had different focus. When I was involved in LPNH, and mind you, this requires a long backup here. Joe, how long did it take you to get all of your movements off the ground and going? How many years have you put into building what you do have going as an activist?
Technically, I'm still working on it. I'm still building the process. Yeah. I'm still doing the networking.
when
I've
I
been at
moved,
it 6 years.
yeah, when I moved to New Hampshire, the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire was 4 people who had their annual convention in a bar, and only 2 of them showed up.
Right.
Darryl Perry declared himself chair. No. And here's the thing: I firmly believe there's a reason for this. Having been here a decade and having been involved in the LP and the Free State Project across multiple states with the LP, there's 49 states where your average libertarian activist has absolutely nothing but the Libertarian Party to support what they're doing, to help push what they're doing, and to bring them together. Here in New Hampshire, the Libertarian Party is just the least effective of 100 different organizations trying to bring libertarians under their banner. So why waste time on it? I had this fanciful idea that it could be more, that Libertarian Party in New Hampshire could be a more effective tool, that it was an undertapped and underutilized resource. And I first actually got involved with the Gary Johnson campaign in 2016 when they're like, oh shit, we need to get him on the ballot in New Hampshire. And LPNH only collected 12 signatures. 12, not 1,200, 12.
Uh-huh.
1-2 was the number of signatures they collected at an event at the bar. So I went and got 4,000 in a week and a half with my team. And we got Gary Johnson on the ballot. And then, at that point, I started to help take over. Now, take over. I have never held an officer's role. I have never chaired a committee, but I have been there every step of the way. I've made the phone calls. I've done the fundraising. I helped manage campaigns. I've put together coalitions. I've lobbied on legislation. I've written legislation. I've been at the State House for every ballot access bill, every election law bill. I was on a first name basis with the Secretary of State to try and help get shit through for them. To the point where LPNH became the biggest affiliate per capita in the Libertarian Party. We were doing things. We were running campaigns. We controlled the majority of a budget committee in the town abutting the largest city in the state with Libertarian Party members. We had multiple lifetime members of the LP elected, not as libertarians, but as Republicans. We had multiple people defect from their political parties, both Republican and Democrat, to form an actual Libertarian Party caucus in the State House, which gave us rights to introduce legislation and stuff like that. We built something. And I thought we could continue to hone this tool to be something to help the Free State movement grip better, because we have organizations like the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which does the lion's share of all of the work. They are the driving force behind the liberty movement here in the Free State. They need help. There are things they can't do because of their nonprofit status and their PAC status. That there's a lane for a political party to do. And I wanted to try and engage that. The Mises Caucus had a different idea. They liked memes, funny videos, and viral campaigns.
But that was one of the things about the whole Reno reset thing, was we had a bunch of nobodies who came in who wanted to take over the party. And literally, they chased out people who had more cred in their personal, social media accounts, in their personal community, efforts, the people they knew, the networking that had already been established. They literally chased out the people they needed to succeed.
Yeah.
Because they
Well, here's the thing.
Okay, so real quick, what would you say is a position that Mises Caucus has that is right winger?
Here's a better question. Here's a better question. Ask your average Mises Caucus member what their favorite book by Mises is.
Weren't they booing Mises quotes when Justin
Amash had said it?
He's up there reading from
he was reading from Human Action, liberalism, and Mises, the Mises Institute wasn't started by Mises. The Mises Institute was started by Rothbard and stole Mises' name. And Rothbard wrote a whole lot about how he disagreed with Mises on a lot of the shit he wrote about in liberalism and human action. But those are the actual libertarian values that Austrian economics is built on, is open borders and free migration and voluntary choice,
which is generally stuff that the MC isn't down with. And look, I'm not saying even I disagree with that stuff, because I do agree with a lot of it. But it's the fact that you're isolating a bunch of people who may be potential allies because you're purity spying in a really bad way. And then they'll isolate LPNH for being too far and too edgy in one direction, which is just, it's so weird, because LPNH has proven to be the most effective Libertarian Party chapter out of all of them. But for some
By
reason,
what metric? By what metric?
By the people that are there, right? I mean, the following and the messaging, and then the
I want a
attention.
definable metric. When people say best, I want them to define what they mean by best. Most Twitter followers? Sure. How many of those Twitter followers are in New Hampshire, actively engaged or actively pursuing political change here in New Hampshire to help that affiliate grow? Very little. We just actually
but I would say probably from chapter to chapter, I would say that LPNH probably, and this is probably a side effect of them having the most followers, but I would bet that LPNH probably is the most involved libertarians out of any other state. And I could be wrong. You would know much better than me.
Sure. They're not involved with LPNH.
Okay.
They're involved with the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. They're involved with Americans for Prosperity in New Hampshire. Now, here's the thing. AFP as a whole, big, large national organization, horribly conservative and right-wing. I have seen AFP New Hampshire go to bat against AFP for being too conservative. and AFP, big AFP, is like, why are you just doing libertarian shit? But it's a different animal here. Now, Ben Weir, he's on the EC of LPNH. He's doing his best to try and do what I tried to do for years and what I ultimately failed at doing, make LPNH a vehicle worth doing something. He just hosted an event. We did a police gun buyback. It was fucking hilarious. The idea from top to bottom. By the way, it was AJ Olding's idea. AJ Olding had pitched this idea for years. We couldn't get any traction on putting it together. Ben followed through with it. LPNH tweeted about it, pushed it, all the messaging. 5 people showed up. 5 people showed up. 3 of us were there as cameramen and documentarians. The other 2, one was a LPNH member who just thought it'd be fun. I asked him if he could bring his dog because it was the Save the Dogs campaign, and the other was a Republican, and the other one was a Republican state rep.
Yeah,
not an LPNH member, a Republican state rep showed up. So all of that social media following, the hundreds of thousands of views and click-throughs and comments, not a single person who saw that on Twitter showed up to the event.
Yeah, this is one of the things. We have an awful lot of really strong libertarian anarchists out there who are members of the Libertarian Party, or were, or will be again. But the thing is it's their individual drive. It's their individual projects. We talk about Spike Cohen, what he's doing with You Are the Power right now.
It's fantastic.
He's not doing that as a libertarian. He's doing that as You Are the Power.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, and it's one of the reasons why a lot of us are saying, no, Spike, keep doing that. Do not divert yourself from that to run as an LP candidate this year.
This is one of the weird few things I agree with Maj Toure on. Like, Maj Toure criticizes LPNH for being nothing but a Twitter account, not actually doing anything on the ground to help progress liberty or do anything. And I actually agree with him. And he's been caught quoting me. He's a fucking piece of shit. I do not like the guy. He's fucking doesn't know the first thing about libertarianism. He's a fucking racist asshole. He has my phone number. You can fucking call me if you want to talk it out or if you want to fight. I don't know. You keep saying you're coming to New Hampshire and I get to see you here. But like, he is right. He is better than LPNH at doing the street work.
Oh, yeah.
And
he's
like,
doing the work.
Here's the thing. I wish he would just stay the fuck in his lane, because some of our best activists, some of the best activists the liberty movement has, are single issue activists who stay their fucking lane and do their fucking thing. Lynn Ulbricht, amazing. One of the most best and most dedicated criminal justice reform advocates I have ever met. I don't think she knows the first thing about libertarian economics, Austrian economics, script. Like, I don't think she understands. But you know what? Fucking, she cares about criminal justice reform because her son was victimized by the state and she wants to right that wrong. And she has driven that lane. Maj Toure wanted to drive that fucking lane of Black Guns Matter and bringing the inner city and urban movements to the Second Amendment. He was doing really fucking good at that. He was doing really, really fucking good at that. He was a really good fucking ally on that issue. And then somebody asked him to open his mouth on fucking economics or immigration, or they're like, you should run for mayor. And he ran on a platform of ban immigration because Mexicans are stealing jobs from blacks. Like, what the fuck? No, he's not the token we need. Like, the token we need is Eric July, who's actually eloquent, intellectual, brilliant, and good at, like, he understands the artistic aspect. Like, Mises Caucus back. If they could get Eric Schley involved in the Libertarian Party, it'd be a different story. But no, they got Maj Toure, who's only here to make a buck and make himself famous. In the meantime, he can't pay his child support. He can't fucking clear up the charges that can't keep him from being able to possess a gun himself. So,
as long as he keeps teaching urban, he is real good about reaching out to the urban population.
Yeah, stay in your fucking lane. Like, and there's other people that are really good at what they do, and they have a role.
Black Guns Matter has been amazing as far as the Black libertarian movement. Being able to bring people in, and gun control, because all gun control is racist.
Yeah, in the last year though, Maj has done so much damage to that brand by opening his mouth on other issues.
All right. Well, and you know what? I do kind of have to tip my hat to him, although it was pretty bad. He was talking about foreign policy, something with like the Iran deal, saying that Biden was giving like billions of dollars to Iran. And someone tagged Scott Horton underneath, and it seemed like he was open to learning. But though, like, I don't know, this whole faux thing where, that Twitter space, he came in acting like a gentleman, acting like he was the one that was being wrong and wanted everybody to work together. I'm like, all right, man, come on.
We got receipts, Maj. Twitter is forever. Like, you can't delete screenshots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, like, so now Dave Smith was supposed to be the the presidential nominee for the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus, or the Libertarian Party overall, and he decided
he never was. Look, here's the thing. I used to be friendly with Dave. We were talking earlier. You used to be friendly with Dave. I had a conversation with Dave on June 8th. 2021. It was right when the whole 6 million tweet happened, and fucking Dave was telling me then how much he didn't. This is before Reno. He had no intention of running for president. He thought it was fucking didn't want any involvement in this, and everyone was trying to force him to do it. He was no intention of ever doing it. And you know what? I posted that screenshot, and that's when after I got in an argument with Dave, and he tried to pretend I didn't exist and he didn't know me. I'm like, really? Because here's this really personal conversation we had about how you didn't want to do this thing and get involved after you were asking me for help with the catastrophe in New Hampshire. He was asking me for help getting Jeremy and Reed under control. Like, sure, fuck off. Here's your fucking screenshot. No, they were blinded. Everyone, they had blinders. He was their man. And here's the thing, Dave has a lane. Dave is an incredible communicator. Dave would make a really fucking good candidate. A ticket of somebody like Dave and somebody like Spike could be something the Libertarian Party's dreamed about since fucking Harry Brown. But Dave's biggest strength is dumbing shit down. Like, the reality is, Tom Woods does his show and speaks at a super high level about economics, the news, state of the world, blah, blah, blah. The next day, Dave dumbs it down, regurgitates what Tom Woods says in a way that everyone who votes for the Mises Caucus can understand. And that makes him so incredibly valuable that people don't understand it. So I understand, like, nobody understands how much actual value he had. I understand the drive people had for wanting him to run for a candidate. He would be an incredible candidate, but he never had any intention of doing it. He was out here trying to fucking pump up stats for that special. And you notice that special, he never fucking publicly said, I'm not running, until the day after that special aired, and he fucking got all the hits on it. But in the special, he makes a joke about how it wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He also makes a lot of jokes in the special that he ripped off from Matt Rife's TikToks or Jeremy Kaufman's tweets, but like, you can do time for that on another episode.
But it's like, around, we look at, and right now there's an awful lot of people who are saying, what the current LNC has done to the Libertarian Party. Can we take it back? Can we reform?
Why?
Can we fix it? Can we rebuild it?
Is it worth it? Like, here's the thing. I think we need to have an honest conversation with ourselves, and I think we need to circle back to early 2000s Matt Kibbe with the takeover. Is the LP a vehicle that can have any effective change, or is the actual move to subvert the existing systems and to use the political operations of the other parties that already exist and have a stranglehold on government to insert ourselves into that machination? Matt Kibbe started the whole fucking Tea Party movement with that book. And like, it worked for a hot goddamn minute. You had Ron Paul, you had a young and principled Rand Paul, you had Massey, Amash, you had DeSantis before his wife got a fucking hold of his brain. Like, you had people in Congress who ran under that banner and on that mission with the Freedom Caucus and the Tea Party Caucus to actually make a change. And like, they did good work. together. They held Congress hostage. How many times did they shut down the government to stop fucking egregious overreach? Rand Paul almost shut down the entire fucking country to stop the drone programs and domestic spying programs. Like it had
filibustered for 13 hours.
Yeah, it had positive, tangible effect. What happened? Why did we get away from that? Well, the system started corrupting people. You see,
the system started corrupting people, and corruptible people actually started taking advantage of the system.
Like DeSantis,
what we did to what Ron Paul did to the federal government. We started seeing an awful lot of really out there extreme ideologies recognize that they could take that and take over states. That's why we're looking at hyper red states right now. It's why we're looking at hyper blue states. It's why we're looking at such divisive positions. And again, this goes back to the whole culture issue. We have no culture to create a counterculture against because we're literally national divorce. We have 2 dysfunctional parents trying to raise 50 different states. And it's like they've allocated the children to the states, and it's like they won't let them go.
Well, you're missing out on a fundamental problem with the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party as well. When the culture, as you've described it, is political division. When the culture is political division, and that is all we have to identify ourselves, what is the counterculture? The counterculture is the apolitical position. The counterculture then becomes the Libertarian Party, which is by definition in principle an apolitical political party. People who don't like politics. The problem with being the counterculture is you don't just attract the people who reject mainstream culture, you attract the people who are rejected by mainstream culture. And if you as a movement cannot filter out the bad from the good and determine who rises to the top in your own organizations and movements and separate those who have been rejected versus those who you've attracted, then you're never going to succeed. And here in New Hampshire, I think we're running into that problem too, where we're finally seeing the power corrupt, where using that Tea Party strategy, we have successfully taken over the Republican Party in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
The Republican Party of New Hampshire's state motto is taxation is theft. That thing that the cathedral libertarians say is too radical for libertarians to actually say. We should say extortion. Instead, the Republicans print memorabilia with it and send it out in the mail. And that happened by accident because we went to a protest once. The governor was giving a speech, and we had a big sign that said taxation is theft. And I said to my friend, I'm like, hey, go stand behind Sununu and hold up the sign. We did not know that speech was his announcement for his re-election campaign, and it was the filming of the commercial. So when they could not get an angle to cut that did not include the taxation is theft sign, so they had to run it. And the Democrats decided, see, all the Republicans think taxation is theft. And the Republicans like, well, fuck it. Let's own it. Sure. They printed pens, they printed shirts, they printed signs, littered the state. There is a 20-minute compilation video on YouTube of New Hampshire state legislators going up to the well to speak and just saying, Mr. Speaker, if I know taxation is theft, I'd vote against this budget. Mr. Speaker, since taxation is theft, I advise everyone to vote against this budget. Mr. Speaker, we all know that taxation is theft, so we must vote against this budget. That's the only argument they make. It's been successful, but now we're getting to the point where the majority leader here, Jason Osborne, who is a free stater, a libertarian, longtime libertarian activist, has started to the system's changing. Now he's
getting comfy.
He's getting comfy. He's the majority leader. He is the most important person in the legislature. He's also cozying up to Ron DeSantis, or was until that campaign went down in flames yesterday. And he was the leader of DeSantis' campaign in New Hampshire, and now he's running. He's campaigning and stumping for a fucking thin blue line warhawk Kelly Ayotte for governor.
So is DeSantis' campaign actually suspended, or is it just like a temporarily? He's going to go deal with shit in Florida, then get back on the trail.
Did you see Trump's tweet or Truth?
No, I don't have Truth Social.
Neither do I. I just saw the screenshot on Twitter, which is hilarious. Trump tweeted, my inside source in the DeSantis campaign tells me Ron DeSanctimonious is going to drop out of the race to run for Senate in Florida instead. 12 hours later, he announces suspending the campaign.
I
think he's going to run for U.S. Senate. He can't win. Here's the thing. Here's the worst thing. He can't beat Biden. Because you don't think DeSantis?
No,
because the heartbeat bill is going to fucking kill him. The Florida abortion heartbeat bill is going to kill him with independents and women across the entire fucking country.
Okay, I understand that argument. Yeah, but
and here's the thing: Republicans don't get it. I had this conversation with the New Hampshire Republican state rep a few days ago too, because it's election season, people are campaigning, and I'm like, what the fuck are you guys doing backing DeSantis or backing Ayotte? And he's like, well, the strategy is it's better for the down ticket Republicans. Sure, we control the party, but if we don't have a majority, we can't push anything through as libertarians. So we got to endorse this fucking war hawk so she can get money for the down ticket. I'm like, that's fucking bullshit. And you know it's bullshit because the people pitching you this strategy are the same people who told you not to talk about abortion at the door. They're the same people who told you that nobody actually cared about abortion, that the economy was the issue. They're the people who failed to poll the 18 to 22 demographic because they don't vote and they don't exist. They're the people who are shocked and bewildered when the 18 to 22-year-old women turned out in record numbers to shut down the GOP nationwide in red states.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Yep. That happens again if you get DeSantis as fucking your candidate. Why? Because all of a sudden Florida's heartbeat bill, which is, they keep talking about the extreme abortion bans. That's the extreme abortion ban. Everyone else is that's the one we're aiming. All the Christian ethno-nationalists, we got to emulate what Florida did. Florida's got it right. DeSantis loses women, he loses Republican women, he loses independents across the board, and he loses 18 to 22 across the board from all parties. He cannot beat Biden. But he could probably beat that whole field in a primary. And it's going to cost the Republicans the House, the Senate, and probably 4 or 5 states.
My mind was always Trump is so unlikable that if I sincerely believe
I'm not saying Trump is better. I'm not saying
no. I know. I'm talking just strictly strategy. Who might win? I think if it's Trump versus Biden again, I think Trump will probably lose again. I think it's DeSantis versus Biden. I think DeSantis being a newer, younger face, I think he doesn't have all the baggage that Trump has. So I think people are probably willing to say things are so bad right now, we'll pull the lever for DeSantis just because it's something different. I think it's the same deal as what happened in 2020 between Trump
because all those people were so reluctantly pulled that lever for Biden in the first place. They're still reluctant there. Nobody's excited for it, but if you can't give them something that's equally palatable, then they're not going to do it. And DeSantis but I think for different reasons to different people.
DeSantis can campaign on his the way that he did in Florida.
DeSantis' wife can run a Twitter account. That's the only reason he's made it as far as he can. The only Republican candidate right now that has favorable polls against Biden, and I'm not talking about just general population polls. People take 538 from them, they got the last 2 elections wrong. Bullshit. They called it fucking to the T. They said Hillary was going to win. They said Hillary was going to win the popular vote. And then if you looked at the state by state breakdown, they had Trump by 2 on the Electoral College. Guess what happened? You only reported on the popular vote. All of the actual polls right now, the only one beating Biden is Nikki Haley. And that's terrifying because she's fucking horrible.
How is she beating Biden when she's not even polling? Some of the polls I looked at,
she can't win the primary. She can't win the primary.
Right.
She doesn't energize the Republican base.
Okay, but
the apathetic independent voters and women will vote for her over Biden because she doesn't represent a palatable, fucking terrifying change. People were Trump won. Because people were we need something different. And then they got something different. And oh, fuck, we were wrong. We didn't actually want something different. We wanted something boring. And so they got Biden.
Yeah.
Nobody in this race is boring.
Same thing. Biden's the exact same thing Trump was, except he's palatable, boring.
Yeah. And Nikki Haley
and he's not a dislikable old man.
He's
That's
not a
what Biden can bank
narcissistic
on.
demagogue.
Yeah. Exactly. You can bank on Biden being the dumbass buffoon who just kind of meanders along, but he doesn't inspire hatred in a lot of people. I can't bring myself
Which
to
he
hate
should.
Biden. He should, but
50 years in Congress, the war against drugs, he supported
the war against blacks. That's all it was. The war against
there wasn't a war he didn't support. If you actually looked at his voting history, he is probably the most evil man in Congress.
Yes. He's supported every single bad policy over the last 50 years.
Only because John McCain is dead.
This is,
I found an article about John McCain from 1999 the other night in my fucking deep dive research. I didn't know this. John McCain launched his presidential campaign for the 2000 election on the eve of NATO's invasion of Yugoslavia because it was his crowning achievement was getting NATO involved in Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
Jesus.
He openly said, "This is the best thing I've ever done in my career."
And you saw an awful lot of stuff if you were paying attention to his votes as well that were downright. But it's like, here we are looking at some of the most evil men in U.S. politics, and they're being escalated to the front end for the presidential seat. And we got to step back and we go, wait, what? You know? And again, one of the other things that we're looking at as far as the extremism goes, we watched the national divorce, we watched the division, we watched the tribalism, we watched all that build between the Democrats and the Republicans. And we've literally watched both sides become so embedded in the culture war, you know, that there's no middle ground. And it's like there's 80% of America right now that's going, I just want to go to Walmart and buy dinner.
Well, that's the thing.
I want to be able to afford my lunch and my dinner.
When Chris Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, announced he was not going to run for re-election, that actually caught everyone off. Like, what, dude? Like, you just set the record for most consecutive terms, and your last term you just won with like 78%, like landslide in a gridlocked 50-50 state. You won like. Back the fuck up and get back in office. Like, I don't like you. You were really bad on COVID, but you vetoed a lot of terrible shit. So please, immediately, first person to declare, Warhawk Kelly Ayotte. One of the worst fucking senators New Hampshire's ever had. One of the worst senators the U.S. has ever had. Thankfully, she was a one-term fucking senator. Her entire campaign right now has been about fentanyl and the border, fentanyl and the border, fentanyl and the border, fentanyl.
The Republican talking points.
Liberty Utilities just sent out a mailer to 140,000 ratepayers in the state saying gas prices are going up 25% this winter. Nobody cares. Nobody cares about the border. Nobody cares about the border. Half the state's not going to be able to afford to heat their homes this winter.
No, they're not.
You know, she's out of touch.
On all this stuff go up, and we're not seeing any relief.
Yeah,
you know, there's no way they can fix the inflation problem. They're not even interested in fixing the inflation problem. You know, and post-Dobbs, we're looking at everybody who's getting so sick and tired of this Dem versus Republican culture war.
Right.
People who are caught in the middle of it. You know, watching the Democrats, in states like California and New York just suck money, and spend without any care for the state. Their taxes are going through the roof. You got red states that are as corrupt as the blue states, and they're infringing on personal rights. Right now we're looking at cops here in Idaho are getting ready to ask our legislature to repeal 4th and 5th Amendment rights for people. Wait, this is a Republican state. What do you do? Back the blue. We got to back the blue.
Yeah. I was told all the boomers and Republicans are getting red pilled on the police by Dave Smith and Michael Malice. They said they're getting red pilled, but I don't know. I don't trust New Yorkers to tell me about how the red staters are feeling when I look right up. What's that?
Like, who are they red pilling? Like, I don't watch Timcast. I think it's a fucking boring program. It's the evening news with added extra outrage for no reason. But I saw a clip of Michael Malice and Tim Pool fucking going on and on and on about, like, all of a sudden now they're pushing a narrative that the Podesta emails weren't about child porn. That people are making that up. Like, Tim Pool was defending the Podesta emails as being the right was making up what they were about and they weren't actually child porn. These people can't make up their fucking minds. Michael Malice was the reason LPNH had a problem because he thought the McCain tweets were insensitive and went too far. Michael fucking Malice, the man whose literal tagline is like, "Don't make friends with your fucking enemies." Like,
and teachers should be lined up against the wall.
Yeah,
he said that before.
Yeah, but like we made fun of his personal friend Meghan McCain. Like, someone he shares dinners with and whatnot, and someone who gives him airtime on her television show.
Should make you ask questions.
That was crossing the fucking line.
Should make you ask a lot of questions.
He's the smartest one they have. Like, if you actually read, like, Malice's books and Malice's work, he's brilliant. He's just such a conceited fucking asshole about shit. And I respect being a conceited fucking asshole. Like, I don't make any means about it. Anybody who's followed me on Twitter for any length of period of time knows I'm occasionally just going to pick a fight that doesn't need to be fucking picked. But, like, when I picked one of those fights with Malice over that and fucking was able to come back with quotes from Michael Malice. And he didn't block me. He didn't insult me. He didn't say anything sarcastic. He just said, "I'm sorry," and start responding. I'm like, oh my God, I beat Michael Malice.
Good. That Zionist deserves to get beat. And yes, he is a Zionist. No matter what anybody says, that dude is,
I'm a Zionist too. I think Jews deserve Israel. I think libertarians deserve New Hampshire, and ethno-nationalists deserve Idaho. Communists deserve California.
And Yinzers deserve Pittsburgh. No, I mean he said that he said in one interview, and he since kind of took this back, but he always said we should bomb Palestinians back into the Stone Age.
Oh, we have.
Yeah. But I mean, Michael Malice said that the
they don't have they don't have a functioning electric grid. Like,
yeah. So what kind of
neither does Hawaii and California and Texas. So I
mean, all right, guys, we're running close to 2 hours here. I really enjoyed this chat. Anything you guys want to plug, anything cool you guys got going on, feel free to drop it, and we'll wrap her up if you don't got anything else.
So things I got going on. I'm running for mayor of Boise City here in Idaho. Homeless veteran, disabled, is running for mayor, major metro area in a very red state. It's going to be an interesting fight because right now my two opponents are very much back to blue. Hardcore. So hardcore that, we've had 6 police shootings in the last 6 months.
You should run on a platform of fuck the police.
Right? Yeah. So
I have a friend who ran for sheriff, and she won the Republican primary for sheriff on a platform of fuck the police. She's now in federal prison, but that's a different story altogether.
In addition to that, we got some big things coming up with medical marijuana initiative. We got ranked choice voting that is now on the collecting signatures here in the state. And open primaries in order to create opportunities for takeover of the Republican Party. Yes, Justin, that is in the works right now in the state of Idaho, simply because they took it too far last year.
Yep.
And we got an awful lot of people looking for payback, and they want the party back. And we got other things going on. Matter of fact, September 16th, Chase Oliver is going to be out here in Boise doing support. Yeah, I know how you feel about that. But right now, he's one of the best candidates for support for libertarian recapture.
That's only because the FSC hasn't published my Form 2 yet.
He's coming out here to help with recruiting for the Libertarian Party. He's coming out to talk ranked choice voting. He's coming out to talk medical patient autonomy, medical choice, body autonomy, and all those good things. I'd get him for 48 hours. Woo! But yeah, so those are my big things coming up, and my webpage, my website for mayor is probably going to be open Friday.
Nice.
A little bit of review for that, so that's going to pop up here soon. And honestly, except for the fact that the anxiety is making my stomach turn and tumble, for all the stuff I got my irons in. This is going to be an incredible freaking summer or incredible fall.
Nice.
Welcome to the fall. What are you doing for the fall?
Well, hopefully it's Justin, go ahead.
So follow me on Twitter at O'Donnell4NH. That's where I just really post everything. I mean, but there's so much going on right now. I mean, I am technically a best-selling author. Don't think that pays the rent, though. But you can check out my book, Live Free and Thrive. It's all about why you assholes should move to the libertarian Zionist homeland of New Hampshire and why it's the freest state in the country, 101 reasons. I do have another book. It wasn't a bestseller, but it is available. You can find those links, too, in my Twitter. I have a bunch of projects I'm doing right now. Working on a short film about the homeless industrial complex. I can't decide if it's Homeless Inc. or Camp Craig. We're going to workshopping a name, as well as writing a new novel and running a couple Substacks, one political, one personal, and a book club. But hit me up on Twitter. My DMs are always open. If you got something fun or something stupid, the other night I got really high and filed a FEC Form 2 to run for president as a libertarian. And it turns out they let me take my own titles. So it's Lord Justin O'Donnell the Angry for president. Then they even let me declare a VP candidate. And that's Tara Kelly of the Libertarian Party Mises Caucus in Texas, the Lady of Xanax.
I'm loving it already.
The best part was
you got to name the committee. What's the committee?
Yeah, they let me name the committee Giant Meteor 2024.
I can get behind that campaign. So, all right, everybody, make sure you go check out Joe's stuff.
Yeah. I'm not going to do a goddamn thing with it, but it exists.
So everybody make sure you go support Joe and go check out Justin's campaign because I think I'm on board now. I know I really like Josh, but this campaign sounds pretty tight. So, all right, everybody, make sure you go hit the links below, follow everybody everywhere, and thanks for listening. Until next time, take care.
You guys take